I want to welcome all of you to the 9th Annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship Summit. Welcome to the stage, Levin CEO Arturo Cázares.
Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm not exactly sure the time zone, but it's great to see all of you, especially for those of you who came out from the East Coast or other parts of the country. This is always a great annual gathering for us, and it makes it all worthwhile, all the work that goes into it when we see all of you with the energy you bring and just the vitality for this community. So very much appreciated. On behalf of Stanford University and Latino Business Action Network, it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to your campus, Stanford University. So some of you know a little bit about our organization, but just wanted to touch on it very briefly. We're an organization created by Stanford Latinos for the community. Professor Porras, who you'll hear from later, had the idea. He was a professor here for many years at the business school to create this nonprofit that could partner with the university to really make an impact for the Latino community around entrepreneurship, but also for this university in establishing a strong connection to a growing and vibrant community across our country. Our purpose in the official mission is to grow the American economy by empowering Latino entrepreneurship. And at first that sounded like a huge goal for a small then nonprofit, but we knew the power of our community, and also we knew what this university meant to us, and bringing the two together would be a great combination. So the three things that we do is we have a big focus on research. We want to get the facts out there about Latinos in this country. And Stanford, the business school in particular, is the leading research institution. The other thing that we do is we have a business scaling program and an accelerator program for entrepreneurs here at the business school. So it's Stanford faculty with the LBAN team, and we put them through a program all about how to grow your business, how to scale your startup, and a lot of great work happens. I should mention that for the research and for this event, we work with the Stanford Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, and with us is Deb Whitman. Her team has been just wonderful in supporting us. Just want to acknowledge her and the staff. For the business scaling program and the accelerator, we work very closely with executive education. David Kang had some last minute challenges, wasn't able to make it here today, but just a wonderful team to work with. Fernando Contreras, all of them on staff have been wonderful over the years. These two programs are just world class, and it's because we work with such a great team at Stanford. The third thing that we do is we build this ecosystem around Latino entrepreneurship. And we see all of you here, bankers, VCs, mentors, supporters, alumni of our programs as part of that ecosystem. So just a lot of great work happening. All of you represent that. Thank you again for showing up. We think that is the strongest of these three pillars. So thank you for being a part of that. Some of you know a little bit about my history, but this campus is very important to me. I was an immigrant. My parents had almost no schooling. That's why we left Mexico, a rural part of the country. I worked in the fields with my father as a boy. Stanford changed all that. This campus has always meant that to me. It opened my eyes to a world. What I found really wonderful, even though Latinos and African Americans and others were underrepresented, is even then the university created these great spaces, like unique spaces like Casa Zapata, Ujama, El Centro. I could see my future when I saw those students, the ideas that they had, what they were talking about doing, Black and brown students talking about changing the world. I didn't know exactly what that would mean for me, but ultimately it led me to this. And I'm really grateful to the university for everything that it did to be a part of that. I continued at Stanford into the MBA program. That's where I had the great fortune to meet Professor Porras, who would later found LBAN. I was still like a snotty-nosed kid. I couldn't really appreciate what he meant, but you can imagine as a Latino professor what he meant to me and the other Latinos who were here on campus. Just it was huge. And you know, for him, he probably just went about his normal daily routine, but for us, it was iconic. And again, just a great example of what can be possible. And the whole idea was, how do we scale that? How do we take that Latino excellence and just multiply it? Because it exists everywhere. We know it, we see it in our communities. Now we wanted to make it real for the whole country at a professional level everywhere. And that's what we're trying to do here. So, you know, my career, I went all over the world. I did the typical, they teach you at the business school to be master of the universe. I did that thing with high tech. I was in startups. I went at running large public companies, tech companies. I was running multi-billion-dollar business units, living in Europe. Just had a blast, a radically different life than my parents could have ever imagined. Doing my thing, and when Professor Porras years later had the idea to do this, the community just started to learn about it. I learned about it through other alumni, and we all started to help out in different ways. Some of us a lot more than me, but I was very fortunate to get involved early with LBAN and get engaged with the university as well to try to support it. Still doing my thing, but as a volunteer, you know, I just thought it was a wonderful idea. I wanted to make sure that it got a lot of traction. A few years ago, I had the great fortune to be invited by Professor Porras to consider leading the organization, and here I am. So just right now, when I think about it, we have a wonderful team at LBAN, just world-class people doing great work. I think about, you know, what we have achieved as LBAN and Stanford over the last 9 years. This is the 9th event like this that we do. We have now had 16 cohorts of the business scaling program at Stanford. The result of that is through all of this research that we have done and these events like this one and others that we do around the country, we've begun to transform the way even Latinos, but the broader community sees us. We're telling now the narrative that is truthful about who we are. We are producers, we're builders, we construct, we add to this country. On every level, there's over 5 million Latino businesses already. We're creating companies faster than any group. The revenue in those companies is growing faster than the average. Those companies are creating jobs faster than the average. Those jobs at Latino-owned companies offer better benefits across the board. Our country needs Latinos. This is our country, and we're here to build. In terms of like where we are with the program, we've had 16 cohorts. We are now recruiting for the 17th. Actually, the 17th cohort's full. We're going to recruit for the 18th now. We're also recruiting for an accelerator. It's amazing to see 1,100 plus alumni of this program across the country. There's at least 250 here in this room, but we have another 900 across the country. New York, Miami, Florida, El Paso, everywhere you could imagine in this country, there are Latinos and there are alumni of LBAN. And they're very engaged, building within their communities and spreading this kind of ecosystem. The third thing that we're doing is creating networks of networks. So all of you in this room, you represent different banks or different VC firms or just different other ecosystem building organizations. I see Ramiro from USHEC. We have quite a few partners, Ying McGuire from the NMSDC. We partner with a lot of different organizations, corporations, Dell Computer, you know, Facebook, quite a few that are part of our extended ecosystem. You all are a microcosm of that national ecosystem that we're building. And again, to us, that's the most important thing. What we want is to build the ecosystem that Latino and Latina entrepreneurs deserve, and everyone else. Through our research, we know there's a bit of unfairness or challenges that are extra if you're a woman founder, or if you're a Black business owner, or if you're a Latino. And it's through our efforts of convening with each other, building meaningful connections, and beginning to address those issues, sometimes they might be systemic, that we will lift not only our community, but this country. America will be better as all of us rise together. And that is our ultimate goal for this ecosystem. So thank you all for being a part of that. Now, let me just briefly acknowledge a few of our corporate sponsors. And again, we have many people who support us. As a nonprofit, this is crucial to us. But there's 4 organizations that have really stood by us through the years and helped us be who we are. First, Bank of America, who is the sponsor for this event today. And we have with us Raquel Gonzalez, Karen Chopra, and many others of her colleagues. Also, Wells Fargo is our longest corporate sponsor. And it's fair to say that Alban would not be here were it not for Wells Fargo. So again, there are several of her colleagues, but I want to just shout out to Jenny Flores, and then also Ruben Barales, just really great representatives of the organization for us. Then our newest corporate sponsor at that level is Chase, JP Morgan Chase. They have come on strong, have really supported everything that we do, especially and in particular this accelerator that we're launching with their support, which is huge. When we look at the gaps in our research, we see the gaps that are the biggest that Latinos are facing, and it is in that startup space. Latinos over-index in tech, but we are extremely underfunded. By creating this accelerator with Chase support, we hope to begin to address that. And it's wonderful to see the support from all of our other partners who are all now jumping in to create a very strong, vibrant support network for those founders that are going to be coming through this program. So the fourth partner that I wanted to mention is Cerna Foundation. And we have with us, I think, Patrice Green, and I also wanted to mention Don Chen. Cerna Foundation is an organization that's really trying to do a lot to support other organizations like ours that are making change in the world. What I want to acknowledge about them is we have learned the most about what it means to build an inclusive economy by our interactions through them. The financial support is clearly crucial. As a nonprofit, we depend on that. But the thought leadership that organization has around those ideas has been really transformative for the way even that we do our work. You know, sometimes we take it for granted as Latinos, we kind of know what our community needs, but it's also good to think about it from, you know, sort of the white paper standpoint of what are these theories of change and how does that really manifest for communities like ours. And because they've been involved with the African American community, different women's organizations, and other organizations that are out there making change, we've been able to adopt a lot of those philosophies and how we show up, and it has made a big difference. You know, the final recognition that I wanted to make is when we look at the community that we have, and literally it's now thousands of people in our ecosystem. We could go to any city, we'll do a convening as Alban, and we will have hundreds of people show up. Alumni from our program, but also from the broader ecosystem. And we could pick any city in this country and that can happen. It all now, looking back after the fact, seems preordained in a way, right? You know, who wouldn't have thought that this community would be that vibrant? But back in the day when he had the idea for it, I think it was quite far from that. And I want to just take a moment to recognize our founder and true visionary, Professor Jerry Porras. So I've said it before, but one quote that always struck me is over 2,000 years ago, an Athenian statesman, Pericles, had said the words as people were marveling over Athens at the time, which was the greatest city in its day. And his quote was, "If Athens shall appear great to you, consider then that her glories were purchased by valiant men and men who learned their duty." When you think about that duty that Pericles refers to, it's the duty that all of us as citizens have to our society. And then when you consider who are the valiant among us, those are the ones that have the courage to look at the world, see it for what it is, and decide to try to make it better. And the truly visionary, those few that are actual visionaries, will seize on a big idea and then try to make foundational change to realize that idea. Why I think it's important to recognize leaders like Professor Porras. A lot of that work of being a true visionary, and when you actually are building a foundation, it's hard work. It's not glamorous. You're digging ditches. No one can see what this thing is going to be. It's a hole in the ground. And you're just trying to lay a foundation because you know what can be built on top of it. And in his case, he built a foundation so strong that now a few of us, like myself, are lucky enough to be able to build and construct on top of that. And that thing that we're building, that new building, it's not for him. It's for all of you and the generations that are going to follow us. A true visionary. Please join me in recognizing Professor Porras. So in the interest of time and keeping you guys going to more interesting things than me talking, I want to do a quick transition to another co-founder of LBAN, chairman of LBAN and trustee of Stanford University. Please join me in welcoming Victor Arias to the stage.
Boy, it's great to see all these people here, and I know there's hundreds of others that are watching us online. So welcome again. Latinos are makers, they're not takers. So let's make sure that we keep that one going. So Arturo just talked about those valiant people that we want to keep up front and know about, and those that are the ones that are creating. It's my pleasure to introduce one of those valiant men as well. And Richard Saller is somebody that grew up in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He studied history and ancient Greek. So very, very appropriate there, Arturo. But he went to school at University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and then Cambridge, where he got his PhD. He was appointed, and he always worked sort of in the humanities as such, was the provost at University of Chicago. And if everybody everybody knows academics, provost job is a really tough job. It's like herding cats. And so that was a great training for him. Then he came here as the dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences here, and that's where I met Mr. Saller, and did great things for that department and for that school. And he ended up stepping down to kind of focus in on just advocating for that field. But in September of 2023, he was tapped on the shoulder by the trustees, by the chair of the trustees, and asked him to please consider becoming the 10th president of the university here at Stanford University. And so he is just an incredible person, a very genuine person, authentic, and he cares a lot about what Stanford means to the Latino community and to all communities. And so it's my privilege to please welcome Richard Saller, President Richard Saller, the 10th president of Stanford University.
Thank you, Victor, for that kind introduction. It's a real pleasure and honor to be able, on behalf of Stanford University, to welcome all of you, both those of you who are in the room today and those of you who are tuning in through live stream. It's a special honor to welcome the alumni of the LBAN scaling program at Stanford. When Victor told me about the program over a football game that we lost, I was really proud to have it associated with Stanford. It shows the kind of constructive work that this university can do when it has the opportunity and the leadership that Jerry and Victor have offered. So thanks to those of you who organized the event today, and I appreciate the fact that Stanford Graduate School of Business can be a home. Today's summit highlights the important role that Latino entrepreneurship plays in the United States economy. As a part of today's meeting, the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative will announce the findings of the 9th Annual State of Latino Entrepreneurship Report. The report explores the opportunities and challenges that all of you face today. Our country now has 5 million Latino-owned businesses generating more than $800 billion a year in economic activity. Clearly, this is essential to the growth of the country. These businesses have made a substantial impact in our society, and their success contributes to a stronger national economy overall and prosperity for the Latino citizenry of the country. The report offers valuable data for entrepreneurs who can use the findings to inform their own decision-making and operations. It also helps policymakers and leaders better understand how to support Latino-owned businesses and fuel economic growth. It's a terrific example of how we can take the knowledge generated on our campus to help inform real-world decision-making. It also reflects Stanford's efforts to enhance the success of Latinos both here at Stanford and beyond. It includes educational initiatives like the program in Chicano Latino Studies and the El Centro Community Center. In addition, research taking place across the campus seeks to improve the lives and well-being of Latinos and the rest of the American citizen body. So I want to thank all of you for your engagement in this work. You have an exciting program ahead of you, including conversations with some prominent Stanford alumni, including Jose Felciano, Julian Castro, and Miriam Rivera. So I urge you all then to make the most of this research and dialogue and the connections that you'll form today. So thank you very much.
Now, welcome to the stage Stanford GSB professor, Levin co-faculty director, George Foster.
So thanks very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I have two areas of research. One is entrepreneurship and sports management. And a few years ago, I got approached by a large apparel company, which is associated with institution in a way that we dearly love. And they asked me, could I give them some advice on productive partnerships? Because the company was having some struggles with some of their partnerships. So I ran a program with the company for about 4 years before the pandemic, and I was collecting a whole lot of information about what makes for a productive partnership and what makes for an unproductive partnership. And I was thinking about that in terms of preparing remarks today, in terms of the partnership that goes on between Levin, Slay, and Stanford GSB. And I think what makes for a productive partnership is that there's a reciprocation between the two parts. And I'll just highlight some of those aspects there, that I think of the Levin, Slay, Stanford partnership as having several pillars. And I think one of them is the GSB faculty led by Dean Levin itself. And we have, obviously, we got research, we got teaching going on there, but in the courses themselves, what we've been trying to do over the years is build up the curriculum in Latino cases. And I know I teach a course now on entrepreneurship, and we have 3 of the cases out of the 18 on Latino entrepreneurships, several out of Mexico, several out of Brazil, and one out of Los Angeles on that. And I've tapped into what is the Levin network in finding out what are great cases to do. And so it's a matter of where ideally the research and teaching we do impacts the Levin Slay programs, but also there's a reciprocation that goes back there on that. I think in terms of the CS, that we're just very grateful that Deb Whitman is driving that program, and the same thing happens there, is that that initiative is predominantly in terms of teaching materials and research, but if you think of the research, I know in the latest Levin survey, I've been doing a project with CES on high and low moments in entrepreneurs. And so we were able to actually tap into the latest survey on Levin and get some feedback from the Levin entrepreneurs in terms of what were their high and low moments. So I think that's mutually reinforcing there. And the other one, I think, is in exec ed. And in the exec ed, they are part of the pillars on which the two programs, the accelerators and the earlier one, in terms of the just building the scaling program. Some of the faculty come from the existing faculty teaching exec ed. Other ones come from Levin, et cetera. And if you sort of sit in on some of those programs, you'll be able to see a tap into a mutually beneficial relationship. So I think ideally we would like to think that the Levin Slate benefits from our relationship, but I just think equally as important, we're benefiting too. And the more we can adopt that perspective, the stronger the partnership is. And that was the message that came out of the program that I ran for 4 years with the apparel company, is that it has to be mutual on that. So where do I fit into this program? It's our part was mentioned that Jerry started the program, and Jerry and I have been friends for multiple decades. And so that was a very easy ask for Jerry and Dean Levin to see if I wanted to sort of take over. But I actually took over from Paul Oya on our faculty, who's one of the associate deans. And so Paul put in a lot of effort, and so I was handed a pretty good pass. In rugby, there's what is called a good pass and a hospital pass. And a hospital pass is, when you get it, you're going to go to hospital before you sort of hit the ground. This was not a hospital pass. It certainly was not my perspective on that. My background I'd been teaching accounting and finance, but also after about 20 years, I started doing the entrepreneur, and I started teaching a program called Startup Globalization Strategies. And the perspective was too many of the programs that go on at US universities just focus on tech within Silicon Valley or something like that. And it doesn't really get to the broader initiatives going on in entrepreneurship all around the US and the globe itself. And so what that led to research. And then after a while, I got approached by the World Economic Forum to see if I would head one of their what they call global agenda councils. The World Economic Forum is nothing short of a little bit pretentious in terms of the titles they whack on stuff, but it was called the Global Agenda Council on Global Entrepreneurship. And so I had to sort of chair that for a while and do reports. But it was a fruitful experience, even though some of the people on the program itself was a little bit full of themselves. Anyway, but you can learn from that as well as humility is a wonderful attribute at times when you're surrounded by people who think they're about 10 feet tall. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the survey itself. I'm just going to make some introductory comments, and I think where this comes from, Barbara has been just an enormously driver of this, very talented, and you'll see they'll be readily apparent in a minute on that, but Jerry and Deb and I have been sort of working with this very regularly and hopefully constructively on this. And it's just been a real learning experience for us as well as for Barbara on that. So let's talk a little bit about just some key findings on that. I'm just going to have about 5 slides. This is actually an impelata that comes from one of the program's participants on that. And it's a food company itself. Obviously, that's not anything you would eat. But that was sort of just a presentation. So let's just talk a little bit about the survey itself. As we mentioned, this one had its 9th survey, but we did 10,000 plus business owners. And the idea, and we work with Qualtrics on this, and I think just about everybody who does surveys has some experience with Qualtrics. On this, my first interaction with them for the World Economic Forum, I wrote a case on Qualtrics, so I understand the organization pretty well. We took 10,000 business owners and we sampled 5,000 of these that Latino-owned employer business and 5,000 Hispanic white-owned. It was all conducted online over a period of about 3 months. And we decided this year to oversample on the female-owned businesses and technology-centric. And so each year we're trying to do something a little bit different on that, and we're very open to suggestions. As we design the 10th one, we're very open to suggestions in terms of where you think would be some extra areas that you would like pursued on that, and we'll sort of see if we can constructively add that to the survey on that. But I think one of the key things, and we'll see this pattern here, is that it is the fact that the Latino-owned businesses continue to outpace white-owned businesses. Now, if you wanted to think of analogy on that, which makes it a little bit probably clearer to understand, if you look at the Latino population in the US, it's a growing population on 2 rounds. One is immigration, but the other way is that the Latino population has a higher birth rate than other communities on that. And even if there was no immigration, by definition, if you are growing faster in terms of number of people coming through births, then you're going to get to be a higher percentage of the economy, of the population. Okay, that's a pretty clear analogy, but that's exactly what's happening here, is that these companies are growing faster than the others, and so that means there is an outside contribution going on. And this has been a pattern for the last couple of years in the surveys. So it's a matter of if you're growing and then you continue to outgrow the others, then of course, the contribution is multiplied on that. And I think that's a very important part of the findings itself. In terms of let's see how we do this. This is one where this is the actual statistics, 8.7% to 5.6%. This is in terms of faster revenue growth on that. That is a sizable gap on that. I just submitted a paper that's coming out in the handbook on entrepreneurship, I think, where we looked at differences in terms of scaling of companies in different parts of the world. And if you can have a gap of about 3 basis points, and you take that over 4 or 5 years, you start to have really significant differences on that. The other areas that we picked up, and I'll just leave this for Barbara, is that Latino-owned businesses have adopted AI technologies faster. Now, we left it up to the participants to define what that was. And so there's a little bit of exploration that I don't think we want to sort of overplay this. Everybody's using AI in whatever way they want to do it at the moment. And there's probably not a conference that doesn't think they have to have more sessions on AI than any other topic at the moment. And sometimes the speakers up there have no friggin' idea what they're talking about in terms, as my notion, they're standing there and everybody's nodding their heads and they're talking about very different things to each other. And so I think it is an interesting aspect going on now that but what it is more an embracing of technology, because it is transformative of what's going on, but how it transforms is very much up to the entrepreneurs, how they choose to make it transform is my impression on that. Before I sort of passed on to Barbara, one of the things that I've been doing in the last couple of weeks is reading a really good book that I encourage you to do. And this book is called Latino-owned, and it's by a pretty well-known author, Maria Arana, on that. And so it just came out. And I'll just read you one or two of the comments on it. This is from Pulitzer Prize, and they said, in the world, Maria Arana would be everyone's favorite writer, and her monument, Latino-owned, would be everybody's book of the year. She's achieved the impossible. She has produced a scorching, moving portrait of one of the most misunderstood and singularly important communities in the country. And Walter Isaacson, who is a very well-known author, multiple books out there. The last one, I wouldn't say subject is a very divisive subject. He just finished a book on Elon Musk. And so his comment was, this book is something beautiful. There's something beautiful in this book. She captures all the strands and weaves the fabric of 1/5 of our nation that is called Latino-owned. This burgeoning population contains many different narratives, as she knows, but there are a number of commonalities. The book helps to explain not only Latino-owned, but just as importantly, America itself. And I think if you have the time, I really encourage you, you'll read it and you'll smile with admiration. So I'll pass it on to Barbara.
Bienvenidos sean todos el día de hoy a nuestro campus. Welcome everyone to our campus. I'm delighted to have all of you here today. And for those of you who are joining virtually, hello and welcome from the Bay Area. Thank you, George, for providing a summary of our national survey and general trends on Latino entrepreneurship from the 2023 survey. This is our 9th annual report on the state of Latino entrepreneurship, and I'm delighted to present the key findings of our survey that we uncovered this year in our 2023 SLATE survey of U.S. business owners. So this year, we made the deliberate choice to switch things around a little bit, as George was mentioning, and we wanted to examine Latina entrepreneurship in a different way. Of course, we kept our comparison of Latino and non-Hispanic white entrepreneurs, and we decided to dive deeper into 3 essential groups within the Latino community: women-owned businesses, tech-centric companies, and immigrants. Now, this is an inclusive approach that allows us to understand the complex realities of Latino entrepreneurs and to acknowledge as well that Latino entrepreneurs do not live in a vacuum. Their experiences, their challenges, and their opportunities are severely impacted by many factors, including their gender, their industries, as well as their nativity. That being said, I'm going to start by providing an overview of the key findings. Then I'll expand and present data on each group. And I'm going to close with the key takeaway points and implications from our report. So with that, let's jump right into the findings. The first group we have is Latina-owned businesses. Our research shows that Latina entrepreneurs are not only at the forefront of business creation, but they're also the most active group seeking financing. But even with this drive, our research shows that Latina-owned businesses are actually getting the lowest loan approval rates from both local and national banks. The second group is tech-centric companies, which are firms that are primarily engaged in developing and selling software products and services or related products. Now, when it comes to tech-centric businesses that are owned by Latino entrepreneurs, they're actually thriving in many ways. The most prominent one being revenue growth. And they're actually achieving these impressive growth rates despite facing issues that can actually have an impact on their scalability, like less cash in hand to cover business operations, as well as a disproportionate impact from the 2023 banking crisis back in March of last year. And the third group that we're talking about today is Latino immigrant entrepreneurs, who actually dominate in business ownership of employer firms. But they actually have smaller businesses that are growing at a slower pace than their US-born counterparts. So with that, let's jump right into the extended findings by each group. Let's start with gender dynamics. Latina entrepreneurs have really strong indicators of like employer business ownership and are actually seeking financing at a faster proportion than any other group. But they have the lowest loan approval rates from local and national banks. This slide here presents a proportion of women-owned employer businesses by racial group, with Latinx-owned businesses on the left and white-owned businesses on the right. And as you can see, Latina entrepreneurs lead in business ownership, owning 27% of all Latinx-owned businesses across the country. This is a significant proportion, especially when we think about 21% of white women-owned businesses across all white-owned employer firms. So I want to highlight that this trend shows a dynamic entrepreneurial engagement among US Latinas, and it also highlights the critical roles that they play in the US business landscape. And besides, their great representation when it comes to employer businesses, this year we actually saw a remarkable trend among Latina entrepreneurs. They are the most proactive in seeking financing for their businesses. This chart here shows the proportion of employer businesses that sought financing in 2023, with those in light green representing Latina-owned businesses, darker green, Latino men-owned businesses, light blue, white women-owned firms, and those in dark blue representing white men-owned firms. And as you can see, more than 1 in every 3 Latina-owned businesses sought financing in 2023. They're the top. And that more than 1 in every 3, it's substantially higher than any other men or women counterparts. Like only 24% of Latino men-owned businesses seeking financing, and less than 20% of white women-owned businesses seeking financing as well. You heard it earlier, regardless of their proactive approach, Latina-owned businesses face a lot of hurdles, especially when it comes to financing. In fact, Latina-owned businesses receive the lowest loan approval rates than any other group from both local and national banks. This graph here shows the approval rates that employer businesses secure from local banks in 2023. And as you can see, Latina-owned businesses, those presented in light green, get approved on average for 39% of the amount originally requested, compared to 60% for white men-owned firms, as shown in the dark blue bar. And actually similar, but even larger gaps occur among national banks, with Latina-owned businesses, again, getting less than 40% of the amount they originally requested, while white men and white women-owned firms get north of 60% of the amount they request from national banks. Now, these are double-digit gaps. 39% approval rate for Latina-owned businesses, and 67% for white men-owned businesses. And I want to remind everyone that access to financing is crucial for employer businesses for multiple reasons. When we think about growth and expansion, that's a huge opportunity that comes from loans. We're also talking about cash flow management when the economy is rocky, and we probably, if you are alive, you know that it's happening. And even hiring and training employees, which at the same time, it strengthens the US economy and benefits American workers. But Latina-owned employer firms are left behind by a lot. Now let's jump to the second group, which are tech-centric companies. As I described earlier, tech-centric companies are those firms that are primarily engaged in selling or developing technology or software products and related services. Our research shows that tech-centric businesses owned by Latino entrepreneurs are thriving in many ways. In fact, they have the highest growth rates in terms of revenue than any other group. And they're achieving this growth despite facing significant challenges that limit their potential for further growth and scalability, like limited liquidity and lack of financing during the banking crisis. Let's start with revenue growth. This figure here presents a 3-year CAGR that white and Latino-owned businesses across tech-centric and non-tech-centric businesses had, with tech-centric Latino-owned firms presented in light green, and tech-centric white-owned businesses presented in light blue. And we can see that tech-centric businesses that are owned by Latinos have the fastest growth when in terms of revenue growth. This rate is faster than any other Latino-owned businesses, and it is also faster than any other white-owned businesses, both in tech and non-tech. The 3-year CAGR for Latino-owned businesses, it's 11.6%, compared to 7.7% among white-owned businesses in tech. This actually means that Latino-owned businesses in tech are growing 50% faster than their white-owned tech-centric firm counterparts. But tech-centric companies owned by Latinos face severe vulnerabilities, as I mentioned earlier. Liquidity is one of them. This figure here shows how much cash in hand businesses have to cover operations if revenue were to be interrupted. And it's broken down by groups. Again, tech-centric Latino businesses presented in light green, and tech-centric white-owned businesses presented in light blue. And as you can see at the top of the chart, over 40% of Latino-owned tech-centric businesses have less than 1 month worth of cash reserves. Over 40% of Latino-owned businesses have less than 1 month in cash reserves. When we take a look at the other side of the spectrum, when we're talking about businesses that have larger cash reserves, well, things are not better. Just take a look at the bottom of the graph, and you'll see that 9% of Latino-owned businesses in tech have enough cash in hand to cover business operations for 7 months or more. That's only 9%. And that is compared to 15% of white-owned tech-centric companies and even 19% of white companies that are not in tech. Now, I want to reiterate that liquidity or cash reserves are so important for tech firms because they ensure that the businesses can have the cash flow needed to, obviously, when we think about tech, we have to innovate quickly, you have to adapt to market changes, and obviously you have to sustain operations without disruption. And this financial flexibility is key in tech, where big changes and big opportunities can come and go almost in the blink of an eye. And talking about financial flexibility that the tech business need, In 2023, we saw this necessity during the banking crisis back of March of last year, with actually almost half of all tech-centric companies being impacted by the banking crisis, regardless of racial ownership. And when we dive into the biggest impact of the banking crisis, we see that 36% of Latino-owned tech-centric firms reported having difficulties securing loans or lines of credit. That's 36% compared to only 23% among white-owned tech-centric firms. This is a double-digit gap that, along with substantially lower liquidity trends, shows that Latino-owned tech-centric firms face remarkable vulnerabilities that might not have good implications in the long run. Now, moving on, the third group is Latino immigrant entrepreneurs. Our research shows that Latino immigrant entrepreneurs absolutely dominate in terms of ownership of employer businesses. And they're actually able to achieve this regardless of owning smaller firms that are growing at a slower rate. Our results show that Latino immigrant entrepreneurs over-index in business ownership. Latino immigrant entrepreneurs own more than half of all Latino-owned businesses in America. More than half. And as you can see in the chart, this is in sharp contrast to only 7% of white-owned businesses that are immigrant-owned. And I know what some of you might be thinking about nativity in Latinos, so let me clear something up for you. The vast majority of US Latinos are actually born in the United States. And even with that being the case, the majority of Latino-owned businesses are in fact owned by Latino immigrants. So with that in mind, let's talk about revenues and revenue growth among Latino-owned employer businesses by immigrant generation. This chart here presents the median revenue of Latino-owned employer firms by generation. And as you can see at the top of the chart, Latino immigrant entrepreneurs have lower median revenues than their US-born counterparts. And as you can see, this pattern persists across generations. For instance, a typical Latino immigrant-owned firm generates $270,000 annually, which is about 10% lower than the median revenue of Latino entrepreneurs who are children of immigrants. And at the same time, the median revenue of subsequent generations, like Latinos whose parents or grandparents were born in the United States, the median revenue for them is almost 20% higher than Latino immigrant-owned firms. But that's not all. Revenue growth rates also show connections to Latino and to nativity and generation of business owners. Between 2020 and 2023, the median CAGR for immigrant businesses was 8.4%. This is compared to 9% among Latino children of immigrants and over 10% among subsequent generations. But I want to highlight that despite Latino immigrant entrepreneurs having the lowest revenues and the lowest revenue growth among Latino-owned businesses, Latino immigrant entrepreneurs have actually faster revenue growth rates than white-owned businesses. We're talking about 8% median CAGR among Latino immigrants and 5.6% among white-owned businesses. And let me tell you something. These growth rates are not just about Latino immigrants themselves, they're about our country. With Latino immigrants owning more than half of all Latino-owned businesses in America, they play a vital role in the economic development and job creation of our country. Now, I know that's a lot of information and a lot to take in, but let's wrap up with a brief summary of the findings. First and foremost, entrepreneurial diversity among the Latino entrepreneurial community, it's so important. Our research this year centers on women-owned businesses, tech-centric firms, and immigrant entrepreneurs to better understand the diversity of Latino business owners and to acknowledge that Latino entrepreneurs do not operate in a vacuum. Their experiences, their challenges, and their opportunities are influenced by many factors, as our 2023 report shows. Now, diving into specific subgroups, Latina-owned businesses are at the forefront of business creation, and they're also the most active group seeking financing. But even with this urge, even with this drive, our research shows that Latina-owned businesses are getting the lowest loan approval rates on loans from local and national banks. The landscape is quite different for Latino-owned tech-centric businesses, which are thriving in many ways, as you can read more in our report. In fact, as I showed today, tech-centric Latino-owned businesses have the fastest revenue growth of any industry across all employer businesses in America when it comes to non-Hispanic whites and Latinos. And they're actually achieving these impressive growth rates despite dealing with severe vulnerabilities that limit and quite frankly threaten their potential for growth and scalability down the road, like liquidity and financing opportunities during tough times like the 2023 banking crisis. And when we think about immigration or nativity trends, we're talking about Latino entrepreneurs absolutely dominating in business ownership. And while they have slower revenues and slower revenue growth rates than US-born Latinos, Latino immigrant businesses are still growing at a faster pace than white-owned employer businesses. Now, I want to emphasize that what George and I highlighted is what we believe are the most important findings for our report. But we actually have a lot more for you. You can now access the full report on our website by scanning the QR code or by visiting our website at gsp.stanford.edu/slay. I obviously encourage you to read the report to learn more about Latina-owned businesses, tech-centric firms, and immigrant entrepreneurs. But most importantly, I encourage you to read our report because there's a lot of things that you can learn that we couldn't cover today, like government contracting gaps among women-owned businesses, like industry distributions, and the benefits and challenges businesses face when implementing AI technologies, and more. Gracias.
Now, let's welcome to the stage for our LBAN Latina panel, LBAN COO, Jennifer Garcia. Panel members, Nora May Cadenas of Supply Chain Capital, Sophia Stone of Inditech, and Carla Cervantes, Border Apparel Laundry.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
How are you all doing? Woo woo. Quick show of hands. How many have been to the Soul event in the past? Awesome. And for all of you that did not raise your hand, we're so thrilled that you are joining us. And for those of you that are tuning in virtually, we hope to see you here in person next year. I can't think of a better way to close off National Women's Month than to have a conversation with some amazing Latinas right here. So thank you, ladies, for being here. And if we can just go down, and we'll start with you, Sophia, if you want to do a brief introduction, tell us who you are and the company you're with.
Sure. Sophia, founder of Inditech. We are building collaboration hubs for large enterprise to interact, transact, and track the performance of their professional services suppliers using AI. And my background, I've spent over almost 15 years in financial services, consulting specifically in risk and regulatory, and 8 of those years running my own consulting firm, and I'm from cohort 14. Woo-hoo. Thanks for having me.
Yes, happy to be here. I'm Nora May Cadena. I know some of my Latino Community Foundation friends are here, and there's a beautiful saying when anyone joins the team. What is it? Welcome home. I feel home. So it's so lovely to be here. I run an early stage venture capital firm called Supply Chain Capital. We invest in healthier and regenerative food and ag systems for people and planet. We've been around for almost 4 years. We're deploying out of a $40 million fund. We've made 18 investments so far, have a few areas of focus, and I'm building this firm on top of a career as an engineer in the aerospace industry and then investing in deep tech. And I was part of cohort 1.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Yes. Representing.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carla Cervantes. I was raised in El Paso, Texas. Raised in El Paso, Texas. And I pursued my career in New York City in the fashion industry. Worked for...
All right.
I earned a degree at the Fashion Institute of Technology in business, merchandising, and management. Also attended the London College of Fashion. I explored my career working for companies such as Carolina Herrera, Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, and I returned to El Paso, Texas to lead the family business founded by my father in 1985. We are an apparel manufacturing company with facilities located in El Paso, Texas, and in Torreon, Mexico. So we provide brands in the fashion industry the ability to allocate and source production in 2 countries, and I am part of cohort 11.
You can tell we're in for a treat with this conversation. For those of you that may not know, as they're describing their cohort, they are graduates of the LBAN Business Scaling Program. So if there is anybody out in the audience today who's a business owner who is interested in scaling their company, you want to talk to them, you want to visit the LBAN website. Barbara just reported on some statistics around Latina business owners. And what I want to call out and underscore is that Latinas are growing or starting businesses faster than any segment, as well as growing revenues faster than any segment. So let me just hear for the Latina businesses in the room. Where are you? That's something to celebrate, right? Because we know that following that, there was a lot of, negative issues that we are still facing, but it's something to celebrate. And so I also want to learn and hear from you, what are you celebrating in your company, in your career? What is one thing that you just want to acknowledge that you're celebrating today? And I'll start with you, Carla.
For a company that's been around for almost 40 years, we're celebrating just being able to survive economic catastrophes. Coming into the company, dealing with recessions, dealing with COVID that just happened. I'm sure that was difficult for everybody. So right now it's, being able to maintain a company, expanding our categories as well, which we'll get into shortly, but diversifying, evolving, and growing. So we're just really, our milestones, celebrating that we're growing in sales as well as in our database with our clientele for both companies in the United States and in Mexico, being able to survive as a manufacturing facility in the United States, which is very important, especially in the fashion industry. So, we're celebrating that we're still up and going, that we're still being successful.
Amazing. When we started Supply Change Capital in late 2020, we were really focused on seeding the kind of firm that could scale and grow, and we could be working on 20 years from now. And I'm celebrating the fact that we closed our fund at Target last year, and we're turning the corner and raising our next one, but have a platform that feels good in terms of who we've invested in, the kind of founders we're supporting, and the people around us.
I think our most recent successes is we have our first patent, an AI patent. It's taken 3 years to get, is set to be approved in April. And already SAP and McKinsey, two people that are pretty big names, have already cited our patent. So we were doing AI before AI was kind of cool.
Big deal.
Well, I'm celebrating the very fact that you all are in this room today, and particularly that our research dove into Latinas. I think there is a focus and a lens that is due to really understand the journey of Latina businesses, and I appreciate that all of you are part of that and that all of you can contribute to a better and healthier landscape for Latinas. Let's go with you, Carla. I want to start with you in terms of when we think about the economic landscape, and there's certainly trends, right? When the economy is moving strong and there's some optimism around that, we see that corporations often embrace this global strategic approach where they might look to identify talent and manufacturing in countries that offer better prices, cheaper labor costs. And the reverse is also true. When there could be negative economic sentiment, companies come back to a nearshore approach. What is, for your company, how do you stay competitive in shifting economic cycles?
Yeah, so for Border Apparel, we're a binational advantage company. We have a factory in Torreon, Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. So what does that offer for our clients? We offer the ability for you to position, especially if you're a lifestyle brand, position different products in different price points for Mexico or the United States. Of course, with a lot of the news headlines, COVID especially, there was a shift from doing production overseas. And we saw that a lot of brands, they feel that as a risk. So we saw that nearshore, onshore was huge. Of course, that's an advantage for a company like ourselves. Mexico, United States, we're close to home. A lot of the brands that we work with are American-based corporate companies. So what we offer, we offer shorter lead times. So we offer shorter lead times on the production cycle, as opposed to you producing in Asia or Bangladesh and overseas, you have your product sitting on a boat for months. For Border Apparel, you're getting your product shipped out of our DC in El Paso, Texas, and you have your DC in less than a week turnaround time if you are, of course, located in the United States. We also compete with adapting to trends quickly. So our company has design and development capabilities for brands, so we're adapting to trends quickly. We're getting you your product in your store faster, so you're able to place an order. We're sourcing with nearshore, onshore vendors. We're all about supporting Mexico and United States fabrications, trim. So we're all about the nearshore, onshore. So when this shift is happening, for us, that's a big win because we're very supportive of United States. You know, we want to see cotton growing in the United States. We want to buy fabrics from the United States. We want to buy fabrics from Mexico. USMCA, we offer these benefits. We're offering these USMCA better price points. We compete with overseas, shorter lead times, and then speed to market. So for nearshore, onshore, we're a big player in that game. Our competition, we're one of the few companies because we have both entities in Mexico and the United States, and we sell and we cater to that. Lifestyle brands, you have a lower price point maybe for mass market out of Mexico. You have a premium brand that you want to do made in USA product. So we're able to do kind of like a one-stop shop. And to your point, you know, for us, how are we willing and how are we able to adapt to that is we're expanding our categories. So expanding our categories, being a one-stop shop. And if you translate that into any of your all businesses, it's really just overlooking and seeing how can I adapt to change, grow, and evolve always.
Really good. Thank you for sharing. And I particularly like how you describe expanding your categories, because that's how we're always positioning our alumni to think about how do you increase your sales in your most profitable category, but how do you also increase the categories that you're able to offer to your clients. Fantastic. Norma, you represent a very small number of people. When I think about women check writers, and particularly Latina check writers, I think Kapor Foundation released a report earlier this year, and in that they indicated of the GPs, only 17 identify as being Latina, and you being one of those.
Yeah. Yes.
So Norma, you had your first fund that was fully deployed. I think you ran that from 2015 to 2020, and now you're on your second fund with Supply Chain Capital. I would love to get your perspective. What has changed in the world of VC for women? Are we making notable progress?
Okay.
Small question.
Lot has changed and not much has changed. And I think, like, if I'll ask all of you up on stage to hold up 2 hands. So hold up 2 hands. Like, count the dedos here, because when I started in VC, there were probably, this many Latina partners. And from 2021 to 2022, you can relax. From 2021 to 2022, that number went from 22 to 29. We have yet to see the 2023 data, but my guess is that the number of Latina GPs is less than 40 dedos. That's really, really small. When you think about an ecosystem of venture where there were $170 billion in deals made in 2023, so something like 15,000 deals, $170 billion. There were $100 billion raised in 2023. Can you guess what percentage of those dollars were for women-led firms? Anybody? What is it? 5? Less? About 3%. And this is women-led firms generally, right? So not even the 40 dedos of Latinas, because most of us have yet to reach the $100 million AUM mark, but we'll hear from Miriam Rivera later today who has, so that's a treat. So the number of Latina GPs is indeed really small. If we think about Latinos as a whole in venture, I think the number is 3%. So it is a small and growing group. And I think what's critical is that if you looked at the portfolios of these 40 dedos, I can't believe I keep saying 40 dedos, of these 40 amazing, we're diminished to fingers. But if you looked at the portfolios of these women, I think what you'd find is increased diversity, right? So what you have to believe is that Latinas belong anywhere smart decisions are being made, when you have to think about long-term outlooks, when you have to consider data and multifaceted inputs. And if you believe that, then Latinas belong as check writers in venture capital.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sophia, let's come to you because you run and lead a venture-backable company, and you have been quite successful in accessing alternative forms of capital. So I'd love to just hear your journey with growing your company and accessing capital.
Yeah, I think it's been, I haven't had a choice. The statistics really show that we're not being given capital. And so you have to really, really be scrappy. It's not for lack of trying. I've had lots of conversations with VCs. I think one of the things that I notice is the bar moves. So it used to be, you need some kind of IP, intellectual property. And so I filed my first patent, and then it became you need a better team. And so my team, my CTO is from Dun & Bradstreet, the leading supplier data company. My quants are pioneers in the industry, very well published PhDs who pioneered quantitative finance. And now that's not enough. You need a product. And so we received $500,000 from Microsoft in the form of interest-free grant, which is super exciting. We built the product, hit SOC 2 compliance, 3 more patents, and now it's a revenue issue. And so now what we're seeing is we're closing 6-7 figure contracts with very well recognizable names. And now the objection is, it took you too long. Why did it take you too long? It's a risk. You're now risky because you're not venture backed. And my favorite one that I received 2 weeks ago was, okay, it's having revenue is not enough. What I need to see is enterprise usage data, which is usually something that you ask at like the Series A, Series B probably level. And so that kind of bar keeps moving. And if you want to do this, you have to figure out ways to find money, to find capital. And that is grants and competitions and pitching. And you just have to be really scrappy to continue to de-risk the business. So that you are profitable. And I think a lot of times we hear that there's a pipeline issue, and I'm here to tell you that there isn't a pipeline issue. It's not.
You got some chuckles in the room as you described the bar continuing to move, and I actually think that those are your realities and the reality of the ecosystem that you're operating in. And when you think about it from the founder perspective, it's quite frustrating to be in it. And I hope that the video and the research and everything really just challenges us to think about what is the part that we have to make someone's experience better, where we're not moving the bar on our founders. Yeah.
I think it's really also easy to internalize that, right? Like it's, what can I do better? What am I trying to do? And I think we also need to reinforce which parts are the system and that it's actually doing what it's designed to do rather than a personal shortcoming or failing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Carla, let's come back to you. In manufacturing, it's a male-dominated industry. And then certainly also operating in Mexico, you have some cultural norms to add to these gender dynamics. And I know that it takes an incredible amount of energy to show up, to position yourself as an equally contributing leader, to ensure that your perspective is heard. How do you do that? How do you do that every day, operating in 2 different countries in a male-dominated industry?
Yeah, so as a woman in business, or just as a woman, I believe there's this role that's tend to be played of what we should be, or where we should be, as a wife or at-home wife. Times are changing, but we also know that in the Latino culture, that's doubled, right? So myself, I started my career when I was very young. I was very resilient about facing the challenges. Of course, I was very lucky when I went to New York I was in the fashion industry, so I, had a lot of mentors and women that were my bosses, and that helped a lot, inspiration. But in reality, I think it has to come from within to really want to do and pursue your career and show up every day and prove yourself. I mean, it's not going to be easy. especially dealing in Mexico. Work in the maquilas. I work in manufacturing, not only in maquila, but maquilas in Mexico. It's very male dominant. I'm in the apparel textile world. It's very male dominant. It's very family dominant. So you're dealing with tios and primos and family-owned businesses, just as myself. I have a wonderful mentor, my father, that founded the company, immigrant from Jalisco, Mexico. He has an amazing story, but I'm coming in and saying, this is my story. And the only way that I've been able to do that is proving myself and doing what I said I was going to do. I had to come in with my own resume. I was not only a woman, but I was also the daughter of the father. So it's a lot of proving yourself. And the only way you're going to get through and, get through these feelings of like, am I enough? Is proving yourself that you're enough. And by that, I mean, with yourself, not only in your business, but also in life. So all the Latino entrepreneurs that are sitting here, I'm very resilient when it comes to not just business, but family, but friends, but my hobbies. And in the business aspect, it's bringing a new taste to my business. This is how the company's been for 30 years. Now, what am I going to do into it? So it's funny because when you were saying about expanding categories, so Border has always been known as a denim-based company. We primarily do denim, garments, all denim apparel. That's very huge in our region in northern Mexico. And in the United States, El Paso's always was, the #1 manufacturing location in history. And from now, what I've been doing is bringing my own taste, showing up, and not just showing up and saying I'm going to do it, but actually pulling through and adding, categories. It started with denim, and I came in and I said, why only denim? Why can't we expand into new categories? COVID came along. Obviously, you had to be only mandatory businesses. We did PPE. We're still doing PPE. So we've been able to expand categories and prove, to other businesses, prove to my competition that, wow, you know what you're doing. Because you can get so many stereotypes. And it's not just as a woman, whether you look young, whether you come from a certain family. And I'm saying generalization because there's so many people in this room, and I'm sure everyone has their story, and everyone deals with something different. But, it's working hard, having your facts, and making sure that you're passionate. You have to get up every day, be passionate, but you also have to be good at what you're doing. And, working hard.
You said two things that stuck out to me. Is one, it's maybe even just proving to yourself. And sometimes it's for us women to just say, we are enough, right? Like you are enough as you are as a leader. And that sometimes is a psychological thing that we have to own ourselves. But the other thing that you said is you had a mentor in your dad. And so I would love to just see, show of hands, how many fathers of daughters are in the room? Mentor, open up doors of opportunities for your daughter so that they can lead amazing companies and be amazing leaders in whatever field that they choose to be. You are the first ones that are going to pour into the next generation of women. Norma, you invest at the intersection of technology, food, and culture.
Yes.
And I was kind of breezing through your website. I didn't necessarily find a diversity mandate in your thesis, but as I was looking at all of your portfolio companies, it's quite diverse, from women to people of color. How does that happen when you don't have a mandate?
Yeah, great question. And it certainly does happen. So 60% of our portfolio companies are led by women. About a third are led by Latinos. 80% are led by CEOs who are women, Black, or Latino, which is a big deal in this industry. And it's not by mandate, but it is by recognizing that we have to be approachable, accessible, visible in the ecosystem, and really appreciating that there is talent everywhere. And I think for me, there's a little voice on my shoulder, similar to Arturo's inflection point story. Mine was very similar, with someone tapping me on the shoulder, introducing me to engineering and MIT. I see some MIT friends over there in the corner. And that changed my world. And so remembering my own story is a daily reminder that there are people like me who have to be touched, have to be brought into the world of venture capital. And that's how this diversity happens. And it's also a conscious process by which we evaluate founders, which means anyone can reach us through our website, and we've now made 2 investments through cold inbounds on our website. And it means that we're evaluating founders against the same criteria. Yes, it may sometimes move and evolve, but everyone is being reviewed the same. And with this consciousness of bias, I think that we can have this equal playing field where we can process founders through in a way that ensures that the diversity of deal flow coming in at the top of the funnel is really represented in terms of who gets capital allocated at the end of our process.
And I just want to acknowledge that, right? I think that it's very, while there's no specific mandate, your approach to finding quality talent and quality companies recognizes and speaks to that quality and talent is everywhere. So great job. Sophia, your product is leveraged by corporations to evaluate their supply risk, and that supply risk includes, but not limited to, minority-owned businesses. And so when you think about the lens that we're in today, the season where the pendulum is swinging quite negatively on DE&I, how are, 2 questions actually, how are you being impacted by this as a women-owned business and as a Latina? And secondly, do you see impact that minority-owned businesses are having who want to or are currently supplying to corporations?
It's a big question. I think supplier diversity is broken, which is going to shock a lot of people in the audience who are supplier diversity people. And I think it's been broken, and I think now we're seeing excuses where people can step away from it. And so I know of a couple big institutions that have pulled their reporting because of what's happening. But I think more importantly, and this is why we built collaboration hubs, is it's stuck in procurement. And it's stuck, supplier diversity people aren't empowered, they're not the buyers. And it's really stuck in Web 1, which is databases with bad data and no collaboration. And so we've kind of moved past that with social media, a lot of interaction, but procurement hasn't. And so I think it's really important to move away from just having databases that we're accessing towards actually getting in front of the buyers and making sure that that's happening. And I think that as this shift happens, we're going to have to continue to prove ourselves. And that's why performance scores is really important, because we are doing good work and we need to be seen by the buyers, which is oftentimes we're not able to do through supplier diversity programs. And so I think it's time to kind of change that and open up the doors and get greater access, and not just access within procurement.
Absolutely agree. I often think about what I represent in terms of representing 1,100 plus Latino-owned businesses, of which more than 50% of those are scaled and certified companies. And so when I think about their opportunity to supply to corporations, I'm sitting on a pot of gold, and our efforts are to say, how do we position these companies in front of the buyer, right? And so for buyers out there, I would love to talk to you, as would any of these companies, right? All right. Sticking on this theme just briefly, Norma, again, we're in this season where DEI is under attack. And what I have been seeing is organizations either, 1, completely abandoning their efforts, or 2, doing this rephrasing, repositioning, remarketing. And I think that is happening both from the LP to the GP side, depending on thesis. It's happening in the nonprofit, in the academia, everywhere. I would love to get your perspective. Like, what is the repercussions of repositioning DEI commitments?
Yeah. And you're, of course, referring to the lawsuit on Fearless Fund over $20,000 grants to Black female entrepreneurs, right? So a ridiculous lawsuit. When again, you think about the percentage of capital that goes to women, and this is a women-led firm, we've certainly seen the backlash. There's a lot of new capital that was earmarked for DEI efforts that has disappeared or is in the process of walking backwards. And for a lot of us who raised from 2020 to 2023, this means that a significant percentage of the investors in our fund may not come back for Fund 2, which means Fund 2 will feel a lot like Fund 1 with new sources of capital completely eradicated. So it's a big miss. Certainly.
It's a big miss. And I think that from my perspective, one of the dangers in that is that we set a new precedence, right? We moved the bar to say it's okay to reposition, remarket, rephrase. And I recognize that it is a challenging season. It's a challenging season that everyone's navigating through. All right, so I have one final question here, and we're going to do kind of a lightning round or a one-word answer, and I want the three of you to respond here. What is one attribute that is unique to you as a woman, as a Latina, that communicates why somebody should do business with you, should invest in you, or fund you? Go for it.
Eldest daughter of Mexican immigrants.
Woo!
I plow.
One word. You said one word and I thought of resilient. Resilient, willing to withstand challenges and face, and come up front and work hard. And for all the women entrepreneurs out there, I applaud you because we're proud of you. And this is the beautiful thing about Alban.
I think really similarly, the child of refugees. My Chinese zodiac is an ox, and I think of ox like just keep powering, keep working, and I think that is what we have to do to continue to prove ourselves. I think we've all said that here.
Awesome. Well, you heard from three amazing Latinas, but there's so many more business owners out in the crowd, and I encourage you to find the attribute that would make you want to do business with them, to invest in them, to fund them. Let's give it up for our Latina panel.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Business School. Such a pleasure to have this event every year. We're so proud here at the Stanford Business School of the SLAY program, of our partnership with Alban, of everything that has been accomplished in this program, to both on the research that you just heard about a little earlier and with the SLAY scaling program, which at this point has taken, I believe, over 1,000 entrepreneurial business leaders through the program and created this incredible network that's in evidence today. And it's just a joy to see this event grow every year and the power of this program to bring people together. So I have the great pleasure for this session of getting to interview Jose Felciano. I'll just give him a brief introduction. So Jose is a graduate of the Stanford Business School. He completed his MBA in 1999. That was right at the height of the internet boom. And so he started his career at a business school with a relatively brief foray into tech entrepreneurship.
Thankfully.
And then moved into private equity. And in 2006, he started his own private equity firm, was a co-founder of Clearlake Capital, and has, over the last 18 years, grown that into one of the most successful private equity businesses in the country. They've made over 400 investments. They have about $70 billion of assets under management. It keeps going up every time I talk to Jose, so who knows? It could be bigger.
75.
75. Okay, so indeed, and Jose's been a great supporter of. He and his wife Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is also here as well. Welcome, Kwanzaa. They've been great. Good shout out. I love it. Yeah, they've been great supporters of this program, and he's also a Stanford trustee, and it's great to get to do this. Okay, I got so many questions, but I just want to give time to have the audience ask a couple. So, tell us a little bit about how you became an entrepreneur. I guess you did it twice, but I'm particularly interested in the time that you became a private equity entrepreneur and started your own fund. How did that happen? What inspired you to do that?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, and thank you, John and Arturo and the team for having me here. So excited to be here and super excited and proud and everything else about this program. It's amazing, Professor Porras. So I'll go back to kind of when I started the firm. I think I sometimes say that every entrepreneur should have or oftentimes has. He or she may have, you need to have an irrational belief, right? That you can do something better that probably a lot of other people are doing. And I think in some regards, that was our story. I had been in the finance business at that point for about 12 years or so. And I have been in the investing business about 6 years. And my partners and I truly thought that there was a different way of investing in private equity where we could invest. And the nugget of the idea was that we were going to combine sector expertise, tech and industrials in our case, with also the ability to invest across an economic and credit cycle. And that doesn't sound that groundbreaking, but it is actually, particularly 20 years ago, was quite innovative in terms of doing that in the context of one single fund. Oftentimes people do that, but they do it in separate funds, and it creates all kinds of complications in our view. And oftentimes they do it in the form of a generalist fund that doesn't have really the industry expertise that we think is required to be a great investor. So that was the nugget of the idea. And again, like any good entrepreneur with this irrational belief, at the beginning people told us that we were crazy and that it was not going to make sense. My best LP meeting, LPs are limited partners, they're our investors. I still remember vividly in our first institutional fund where this very well-meaning lady basically sat me down after they rejected us. And you do have to take no for an answer many, many times if you're in the private equity business raising a fund for the first time. And she basically sat us down and said, listen, your strategy just doesn't work. It's never going to make enough money. It's not really private equity. You're never going to do X, Y, Z. But again, had that irrational belief, so we persevere, and it worked out.
Were there, on the topic of low points, were there once you got going, were there points where you thought this was not going to work out, that you weren't going to be able to make it successfully with your own fund?
Yeah. Well, a couple ways to answer that question. Number one, I think we can argue about success, right? Success is not really a destination, right? You're always running. Failure could be more of a destination, although it's also a starting point. It's also a starting point. But I worry. This morning I woke up thinking about the next 10 years in private equity and whether or not we're going to survive. So I'm still basically at that point. But probably the low point for the business was we started the business then in December of 2006. Very quickly the world changed. Obviously the great financial recession, kind of occurred shortly thereafter. We were in the middle of raising our first institutional fund, which means that we were actually going out to investors, limited partners, to try to raise capital. And we printed what they call the PPM, the private placement memo, in June of 2008. As we all know, right, kind of by the end of 2008, the financial world as we knew it was almost ending, right? At least people were worried about that. And it was a complete upheaval. It was a horrible time to raise capital. And And we were able to do one close, so we were able to get some investors to come in early. It was a very small amount of capital on a relative basis, about $136.5 million, even though I don't remember very well, but it was about that. And we were able to invest that capital in the beginning of 2009, but we were not getting any capital from investors, So probably I would say March of 2009 was probably the low point. That was the trough of the market. But at that point, if we had had this conversation, right, it was very unclear that Clearlake was going to survive. It was probably more likely that I was going to go back to being an investment banker. So no offense to any investment bankers in the audience. I like them most of the time. But anyway, it worked out. But we persevere. It was a very tough time. We kept calling. We kept getting no's for an answer. By probably the third or fourth quarter of 2009, the world was starting to open up a little bit, and we were able to raise some additional capital. But in hindsight, it was a great time for us to really apply. Right? We had to. It was really put to the test. Did we really believe in our strategy? Did we really believe in what we were doing? It would have been very easy to quit at that point. But we had, again, this belief that our strategy, our fund was set up actually to take advantage of times like that. So we probably invested 80% of that capital. And in hindsight, that was a great time to invest, and that served us well.
What gave you that conviction that things would work out? Like, where did it come from, and what reinforced it, or when you were starting?
Oh boy, being a little naive, ignorance, support from loved ones, like Kwanzaa and others that were there, encouraging me and the team to keep going. I think. Again, at that point, I had been an entrepreneur, I had been an investor, I had failed. I think actually that was, in some regards, that's actually as formative and as important as anything else, because then you have the opportunity, or at least you have, I think, an obligation to challenge yourself about, kind of look in the mirror and rethink, right? Are we doing the right thing? Does the strategy work? Why do we think it works? And you get to replay that over and over again. And at least at that point, our answer was absolutely, right? Like everything that we have been talking about for the past several years was not only valid, but we were seeing it play out in the markets, right? That was a moment in time where the markets were in complete upheaval, but if you were completely rational about it, you could buy dollars at 50 cents. And every time in the world, at least from an investing perspective, when you can buy dollars at 50 cents, you should do that. So we had a lot of belief, a lot of conviction. Obviously, on a probability adjusted basis, we should have failed, but we survived. Interestingly enough, some of the lessons of the .com, kind of era, the failure, the not success of my .com were actually very helpful in terms of understanding how to manage through a crisis, in terms of almost understanding kind of human behavior and in the .com world, we had the opposite, right? We started out as a hot quote unquote .com, and then a year and a half later, we couldn't raise a penny. So I understood, how quickly market sentiment can change, and some of those lessons, both from human and management, OB, the touchy-feely, the OB classes, all those became very helpful. But having that experience was actually very instrumental.
That's fascinating. Now, we heard in the research about, and actually I think hopefully everyone read in the Wall Street Journal this morning about the incredible growth of Latino entrepreneurship in the U.S. There's still very few Latino-run private equity funds and really asset management. We've talked about this many times. Curious about how you think of your sort of being a role model to people who aspire to get into investing or into your industry.
Well, first of all, having been around when the conversation started about starting this program, and people like Jerry and Victor and Saul, Arturo, how cool is it that we're in the Wall Street Journal this morning, right? How cool is that? Well, it's interesting. I very kind of you to mention me as a role model. I oftentimes don't really think of myself that way. I think, but I do understand, right? That all of us do have this responsibility. There's a higher bar somehow, because I do understand that at some level, right? The success of Clearlake obviously has been great for me personally, and it's been quite a journey. But every day, right? When I talk to an investor, every day when I think about our business, I do know that there's a little bit, justly or unjustly, mostly unjustly, that other investors out there are going to be judging a new fund, Miriam's fund or Alejandro's fund. They're going to be saying, well, I had a good experience with this investor that looked like this, or I didn't. And they're going to make certain, assumptions. They're going to have certain assumptions, either consciously or unconsciously. We read a lot about unconscious bias. So I take that responsibility very seriously, and I have always said that, the best way to help ourselves and help our community is by performing, right? In our business, in my business, performance is the product. I think you have to have great performance, and the best way. The good thing is that by and large, there's some objective measures in our industry, and if you're good, you're good. If you can outperform, you can outperform. I think I'm a huge believer, though, and one of the reasons I'm here, I do chats like this, is because for a long time we were super quiet. Even if you go to our website right now, you won't see a picture, you won't see a bio. We're a little bit unusual in that regard. But I do think that there's also an implicit responsibility to tell a little bit of the story, because I know for myself that when I look at people, when I see examples of others that look like me or that I can relate to, that have succeeded, that does serve as some sort of inspiration for me, right? It almost, I always joke around, right? If I can help, if there's somebody out there in the audience or online or whatever and says, hey, that guy doesn't sound that intelligent or that articulate, and he's been pretty successful, right? I can do that, right? I can do that. I think there's a lot of that. Victor, are you applauding the no so? So I think there's something about that, right? Oftentimes, and particularly, I think underrepresented people that come from underrepresented backgrounds, underrepresented minorities, etc. Our biggest limiter sometimes it's ourselves, right? It's basically not having the self-belief or imposing limits on ourselves. There are many moments in time when we were, kind of racing another fund or trying to go after some other achievement, that it would have been very easy to say, wow, don't do that, right? That's risky, that's crazy. Why would you think that you can raise $1 billion or $10 billion? And the fact of the matter is that we have done it. And there's always a little feeling in your stomach, right? That are you going to succeed? Or are you going to fail? Or are you going to be embarrassed? Or is it going to work out? But again, oftentimes I think we are our worst enemy. And I think it happens a lot in our community. We all heard about the imposter syndrome, right? I still feel that way, right? I don't know why I should be here. This is cool, being here at Cemex Auditorium, but I still feel every day, right? Did we get lucky? Is Clearlake really better than so many other funds, or we just got lucky? And can we keep that luck going? But I think that's hyper important. So again, if this is a room full of entrepreneurs that have been successful in their own right, and I think each and every one of you is really that example for somebody else, right? Because when that kid or little girl, little boy sees somebody that they looks like them, and they're like, wow, and they did this, and they are involved in this business or that business, and they have been successful, and they see that success translated in the opinion of others. I think that's so powerful, right? And I think oftentimes we can touch so many more people and so many more lives than we're aware of. So anyway, that's why I'm here. But that's what drives me a little bit.
Great answer. Let me ask you a little bit about investing, where the performance comes from. So when you're looking at, I guess you're often looking at quite big companies, but I'm curious, when you also do some smaller scale investments, earlier stage investments, what do you look for in a company? What for you is the things that would drive you to make investments in a company?
Yeah. Well, for us, I think we start with our core principles of core to our strategy, which is it has to be a sector that we understand well, a company that we understand well. Ideally, a good valuation, but there's a key point, which I think has been a key focus area for us over the past decade, which is when we look at a business, we try to understand what is it that we can bring to the table as investors, or what is our idea or differentiation point, the angle, if you want to call it that. What is it that we're going to do differently, right? What is it that we're seeing in this business that is a little bit different than everybody else? And oftentimes that is the key to a successful investment, right? That's what allows us to either pay more than others or maybe buy a business that others are overlooking, right? Not that interested. And I think there's a little bit of a parallel there, right? Kind of in, Juan and I in our initiative, we have invested a lot of capital with underrepresented minorities and women, managers, and some of them are represented here. And part of it is that it doesn't make sense, right? But with great returns, I'm talking now about fund managers, with great returns or comparable or better returns than the average, they're not getting capital, right? So for example, if you look at underrepresented minorities and women funds led by those groups, we get 2% of the capital, and even that number is overstated because if you do 2% of $1 trillion. It's about $200 billion, and between my fund and Robert Smith and a couple others, you probably account for 60% of that capital. So the capital is not flowing there, but that to me represents opportunity, right? That tells me that there's a big part of the market that is missing something, and that's where you go. You go where places where there's a good ideas and scarcity of capital. That's kind of the core principle of investing.
For some of these folks in the audience, we've probably got, I don't know, I'm guessing, how many here are graduates of the scaling program in the audience? Yeah, terrific. Welcome. It's great to have you all back on campus. So what are, for them and others who might be going out to at some point to raise equity capital, what are the things that they could do that would make them more attractive to investors? What are the types of things that you think would help them?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think first start with some of the reluctance of many people in our community, great entrepreneurs, but I think there's a little bit of a reluctance. I'm sure kind of in the program we talk about it, but sometimes there's a reluctance to take on debt, which I understand, but that is a necessary part sometimes of scaling a business. Sometimes there's a reluctance of bringing a partner, right? Kind of raising outside equity. I think there's a little bit of that reluctance. So I think it starts there. And I think, obviously, hopefully you run a great business, and I think if you were starting from scratch the business, I think I'm a big believer of ownership. And clearly we're talking about entrepreneurs that own their own business here, but I would extend that further, right? Services businesses are great, but businesses where you own the IP are even better, right? So I extend that. We oftentimes, Latinos are, when you look at media and you look at the broader kind of society, there's a lot of acknowledgement that we are a growing part of the population. We're young. We have a lot of purchasing power, but I don't care about purchasing power. I want ownership, right? I want ownership of our homes. I want ownership of our businesses. I want ownership of, kind of intellectual property assets that generate rents over the long term. So I think thinking about your business that way, and even if you have a service business, you may be generating somehow or another, you're getting data, right? In today's world, right? AI data. So I would think very broadly about your business and how you can exploit, or find maybe hidden assets or, kind of within that business. And then the last thing I would say is, and this is kind of hokey, but I apply it to ourselves, right? Kind of oftentimes entrepreneurs, we get so enamored with our idea, and we get frustrated because others don't understand that idea. And part of it is, I call it the vanilla ice cream problem, right? Like you go to a supermarket and you may like pistachio ice cream and you may like, sea salt caramel, but there's a reason why 80% of the ice cream aisle is vanilla ice cream. because that is what people want. And that's what people buy, right? So if you come up with this incredible new structure, that's great, but it's going to be tough, right? So I think you need to find a way of communicating that idea and packaging that idea in a way that people understand easily, that feels familiar, that feels, like investors, we're all about pattern recognition, right? We're always trying to find that pattern that has proven successful in the past, and we're trying to apply it again and again and again. So you have to fit it a little bit into that mold. Doesn't mean that you need to sacrifice your idea or compromise in any way. It's just marketing. You need to package your idea and your solution in a way that's familiar to others, and particularly for investors, that's easy to invest. Don't make it difficult. Make it easy. Yeah.
That's great advice. I want to. All right, I want to get one question from the audience so that someone has a chance. Whoa! All right, that was you. Get the question. That
He was ready. He was ready.
That was fast. All right. Love it. Somehow I had a feeling that the question might be about, for those of you, now Jose said that Jose said that his fund likes to keep a low profile and sort of fly under the radar screen. And then they bought the Chelsea Football Club in London. And now they're not under the radar screen anymore. So
good point.
But you were doing a good job staying out of the media until you bought Chelsea. Okay, so the question was about the Chelsea Football Club, which, by the way, at least you're in the semifinals of the FA Cup. So that's
there you go. Go Chelsea. Go Chelsea. We have when we got there, we didn't have, I think, any Latino or Latin American players, and now we have we had Thiago, but now we have two captains of the Brazilian national team. There you go. Follow Português também. So the direct answer to your question is, how do you get on the board? You buy the team. That's the easiest way. But the more interesting part of the question is that I do think outside of technology, right? Sports is actually pretty interesting because you think of software, massive sea change actually in the business model of software companies over the past 20, 30 years, where they became, they went from license-based, very unpredictable revenue companies to SaaS, right? Service, subscription-based companies with essentially 99% predictability of revenues. Sports is not quite that way, but if you look at sports 25 years ago, about 10, 15% of your revenue was media. The rest was basically day off tickets, merchandise, all kinds of things that were difficult to predict. And a lot of them, had to do with the success or not of the team on the pitch, as we say in England. Today, fast forward today, you take any major league across the world, most big teams, 60 to 85% of their revenue is locked in multi-year media contracts. Mm-hmm. Another 10 or 15% is probably multi-year sponsorships. And then a very tiny sliver, 5 or 10%, is actually, more unpredictable. In our case, in Chelsea, we're sold out, et cetera, et cetera. So even that portion is much more predictable. So you tell me any other business that has gone through that transformation, right? From basically 10, 15% recurring predictable revenue to 85%. And that's the reason why there's a lot of interest in terms of institutional capital in the sports space. And that's becoming kind of a really hot, interesting area. And then you on top of that, like whenever the team is, for sale in whatever town, city, or locale that you're talking about, there's always one random billionaire that, was not good enough to get on the pitch, but you can buy yourself into the board.
That's a great answer, actually. It's interesting to hear the economics of why it makes sense to buy a sports team. There's obviously a lot of other things that go with it. We're pretty much out of time, so let me give you an opportunity to any final words you want to give to the audience here. You've seen this group grow from a small group when we started to something like this with more than 1,000 people attending this event. Anything you want to share with them?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it, right? But each and every one of you, right, can be that change agent, that role model in your communities. I think you're doing that already, but do not underestimate, kind of the power of doing that. I think one of the things that I'm very proud of and kind of excited about this program is also the network that comes with it, and the ability for each one of us to help each other. And to a question, for example, financing and stuff like that. One of the things that Juan and I have done, we have invested in a bank, in neobank. Again, to try to encourage that virtual cycle. But I would also say that don't get discouraged, right? The business is not going as well, or things are not going as well. There's so many things that I learned from my little .com failure, and yeah, there were moments in time, like we talked about in March of 2009 or March of 2000, where the world felt really bad, and I, moments that would have been easy to give up and to say, what, I'm gonna go back and get a real job. But I think if you have that belief, that we were talking about, and you have that conviction, and you have a great idea, I would just persevere, right? There's so many ways of succeeding. Don't be afraid of pivoting. Don't be afraid of changing your idea. As long as you have that true north, and there's one element of that idea where you have that true conviction, you should keep pursuing it. And there are many cool and quotes about success and failure, but I think one of them is that when you fail, it's a success. You found one other way. I think it was Henry Ford that said it. Like you find one other way. At least you figure out one way that it's not going to work. But there's so many other ways that it can work, right? So keep trying. But anyway, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, guys.
It is great to see all of you here. And I know that there are many more of you here than are in this room. So it's a pleasure to be here. And it's a pleasure to have experienced and listened to all of the information that's been shared with you up to now. My role here is to try to move from listening and getting information to thinking about doing something with it. But before I begin that, I would like to acknowledge and introduce, and I'd like for you to stand up and stay standing, the people who were part of the original L-Band founding group, so that you can get a chance to see them. Victor Arias. Yeah, Phil Pompa. Frank Ramirez. And Julia Sullivan, are you happen to be in the room? Julia? No? Okay. And I know Richard Lessa is not. Those were the five. Those are the five people who were involved in getting all of this started. But thank you. They keep wanting to give me credit for things that I don't deserve. In any case, I wanted to introduce them not only because I think it's important to acknowledge them, but also because it harkens back to a discussion that we had at the very, very beginning when we were deciding on what it is that we wanted to do. And we said, well, let's create a nonprofit, got to have an organization to focus us and bring us together. And then the question was, well, what are we going to name this? And a lot of names were tossed out. I don't even remember all the discussions, but I think Latino was obviously going to be in the title, and business was obviously going to be in the title. And then we thought network would be a good thing to do because networks were really becoming a big deal in those days. So we used the word network, and we kind of thought we were done. But then as we started thinking about that name, it became clear that there was one word that was missing that was really, really critical. And that was the word action. We didn't just want to create a network. We didn't want to put on conferences like this and get everybody all charged up and feeling good, et cetera. Then you go home and nothing happens. We wanted to create action. Action in everything that we did, and hopefully in influencing other people to take action. And so that's what we're about. We're about taking action, doing something with the information and the knowledge that we gain. So today you've really heard a lot of new ideas. You've heard experiences, perspectives, opinions, and all of them have been quite interesting. And my question now to you is, what are you going to do about them? What are you going to do about what you've heard? Now, clearly, you can't do 1,000 things with what you've heard. You can't go out and change the world in one fell swoop. But what you can do is something. And that's what I'm trying to encourage you to really begin to think about. So I'd ask you to do two things. One is, at the end of the day, because you still have a lot of other stuff that you're going to hear, at the end of the day, reflect back and pick out one thing that you learned that you found particularly interesting. Just one thing. And then ask yourself, what can I do? What action can I take to promote that one thing in a positive way? And the one thing you think about could be about one of the successes that you're hearing, because Latinos are having great success. What can you do to contribute to that success in your own way? Or if there's a barrier that you heard that particularly piqued your interest, what can you do in a small way to overcome that barrier? And I'm talking about small things, okay? I'm talking about think small in this case. Don't think big. This is hard to talk to an entrepreneur and tell them that. Think small. What is one thing that you can do with the information that piqued your most of your interest? And that action doesn't have to be big. It just has to be concrete. And most importantly, you have to be committed to doing it. All right? So pick something that is doable for you. So let me give you some hints. Okay, if you're in the banking business, raise your hand. Good. Well, what can you do to promote the increase in the number of loans that are given to Latinos, especially Latinos, Latinas, and immigrants? What can you do? If you're a capital provider, you're a venture capitalist, you're a VC, you're an angel investor, raise your hand. We have some of you in the room. Okay. Well, what can you do to seek out Latinos businesses to invest in? Now, I know that the reality of the world is that you're flooded with people coming to you, offering you deals. So it's easy to sit back and just kind of wait and let them come to you and then take your pick. But you're not getting in touch with enough Latino businesses with that perspective. So what can you do to begin to change that and go out and seek Latino businesses to invest in? And that way begin to change the dynamic that we've experienced and seen. If you're a government official, raise your hand. Any government officials in here? Small number. Well, what can you do to tweak a policy or to influence the creation of a law that might promote and support the growth of Latino-owned businesses or decrease the blockages that they exist? What small thing might you do? It could be a phone call. It could be writing an email. It could be having a conversation with someone. But there's something that you can do. If you're employed in a large corporation, raise your hand. Okay. Well, so what can you do to influence and somehow affect the procurement process in your company? Now, you're probably distant from it. Most of you are. But what can you do to somehow change the way procurement is done in your company so that Latinos get a better chance at getting contracts from your companies? Because you have a lot of contracts that your companies give out. If you're a nonprofit leader, raise your hand. So what can you do in your nonprofit work to promote Latino businesses in your communities? And whatever it is that you can influence, is there some way that you can begin to promote the success of Latino businesses? And finally, how many of you are business owners or business leaders yourselves? The majority of you. What can you do to create more business with other Latinos? With Latino businesses? What can you do to generate business with them? And the motto that we have in the program that we offer is do business with each other and get business for each other. What can you do in a small way? It doesn't have to be huge. What can you do to change that reality of the business that you do the people that you do business with? The bottom line is I'm not asking you to do something huge. I'm asking you to do something small. The important thing is that you're committed to doing it, as I said. The reality is, if each one of you just did something, and there are potentially 1,000 of you listening to my voice right now, not only in this room, but online. If 1,000 of you did a small thing, just think of what difference that could make in the world of Latino businesses and in the world then of Latinos, because it's Latino businesses that are going to drive the success of the Latino population in this country and also drive the success of the country. And this is a reality that, for me, is going to exist in the future, not the immediate future, but in maybe the next 20 or 30 years, that the success of this country is going to be driven by the success of Latinos. And Latino businesses are going to be leading that. So you need to be the one that makes a difference. But it has to start with you doing something, with each of you doing something. So I leave you with this idea that you should do something. Repeat after me, do something. Do something. Again, do something. Do something. Hey, I'm 85 years old, I can't hear you very well. Do something. Do something. Okay, thank you. Here's Victor Arias.
Do something. Orale. I told he needed that orale to that. So, sometimes the adage is that you save the best for last. Well, that's not the case today, okay? But it is my job, my privilege to just thank everybody for being here. You've heard from the president of Stanford University, from Dean Levin, from trustee Jose Felciano, from our CEO, Arturo Cázares, from our COO, Jennifer Garcia, from Nora May, from Sophie, and from Carla, our faculty sponsor, George Foster, who we're very appreciative of, our SLAY research, Barbara, you did a great job. Thank you very much. And obviously our visionary, Jerry Porras. I want you all to please, I assume that you enjoyed what they all said. And if you did, please give them a round of applause. And I know Jerry talked about at least some of us that had a hand in trying to help put this together, but I would be remiss if we didn't also recognize one of our prior CEO for LBAN, and that is Mark Madrid. Mark, where are you? Yeah, he earned his nickname Red Bull Madrid from me. Thank you. Anyway, but also it takes an incredible team. I have observed our team just tirelessly working on putting this whole thing together. And I happened to see them yesterday as well. They're just incredible. So, Arturo, Jennifer, Elian, Marianne, Alejandra, Lucia, Annalisa, and Carlos. Please, if they could, please stand up. Please stand up. All of you on the team, please. Where are you? Marianne. Jennifer. They have made it happen. We are a small but mighty team, and we're just so proud of them. Look to your left, look to your right, look to the front of you, look behind you. That's the power of Latino entrepreneurship. That is what is driving this country, and we will continue to power the U.S. economy. We hold our heads up high because we matter. We matter. Stanford gets it. Telemundo, who covered us nationally as well, they get it. We all get it here in this room. So let's just keep everything going, moving forward and upward. And so with that, I'll say adelante. Thank you all for coming, but I'll have some other information for you. But anyway, thank you all for coming, okay?